Hey girls, we're going to look at some build outs, see if we can make some tweaks and improve on this moving forward. There's been some good, especially from this past weekend, but certainly some things we can still work on too. So this is very early in our very first game at Bethesda. You can see as Gwen receives it, our spacing is pretty good. We have our fullbacks wide, we have our front players high, and you'll notice we actually have Abigail in lots and lots of space here. So anytime we're building out, we really want to try and find the highest open player. And I just think we're a little bit impatient here. So Gwen, you try and force this ball forward pretty early. Okay. And I think this is a moment where we just need to be a little bit more patient, swing it around the back, but ultimately still looking for that opportunity to go forward. Okay. So if we run through this one again, maybe as this pink team slides across, okay, it might be the time to come back to Aris or back to Addy. And again, it's important that we try and identify during the game who our open player is going to be. This is another clip shortly after. So Gwen, you try that same pass again, which works this time. We have AB checking in, and we get a little ball set out wide to Ainsley. So not the worst little kind of pattern of play, but we'll notice again, because we're building down the right side, Abigail, who's our left-sided attacking midfielder, has tons of space again. All right, so we actually end up getting the ball to her just, but it's a little bit sloppy. It's kind of in the air, it's bouncing, and it's not really something that's clean that she can deal with. So again, I think being a little bit more patient here, making sure that we're finding feet, maybe swinging the ball back around now. Ainsley going back to Gwen and going back out the other side, and then quickly looking for Abby. But again, I think this one, it's not really necessarily a spacing issue or a positioning issue. This is just more of a decision-making issue of maybe trying to jam it down that one side, but also maybe just not getting the ball cleanly enough into the areas we want to get it into. So on this one, we have a little bit of a positioning issue. So you'll notice this is about 4 or 5 minutes later, but now we have AB who's checked in real deep, even while the ball's still with Aris. We have Sophia checked in deep, and this has automatically now started to reduce the amount of space we have in the middle. Okay, Abby had a lot of space before. Stephanie had a lot of space to check into, and now all of a sudden that's become a little bit more condensed just by our wingers checking in a little bit too early. Okay, so what this ends up, even though we're a little bit more patient to begin with, Gwen goes back to Aris. Okay, now it allows the pink team to step up, and then Aris, you kind of try and force it into an area where they still have a lot of numbers. So it's a pass to Ava that, even though it kind of makes it, it's a difficult one to control, and even if she gets it under control, there's going to be a lot of pink players around. I want to talk about our positioning of our midfield players. So as this ball travels to Addy, AK, you're our 6, and by you checking across into this area right here, what you're actually doing is taking away a passing lane, possibly into Abby. You're also bringing over more defenders, and again, we're helping them condense the play to this side of the field. Okay, so Ava, a better movement for you there would be maybe to just drop yourself into this little space where the black arrow is. That way, Addy can maybe turn out and play you a lateral pass, so that way you can turn out of pressure. That also keeps maybe some lanes open, possibly into Natalie Lemenz's feet, possibly into Abby's feet. But there's a few other issues we have here too. So if you've checked in real early again, okay, so you've taken yourself out the game, but you've also condensed this space. So we now have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pinks around the ball, which is going to make it really hard to progress. Okay, so Soph, stay higher. Abby, again, we've talked about trying to play back beyond in the blind spot of their midfielder who's marking you. Natalie, you end up checking in really deep as well. Okay, again, so we just need options to be able to play out of this pressure, but all of our options now are kind of in this little zone of pressure that the pinks have created. So if I run through it again, I think again, AK, just stand still. Abby, if you can start a little bit higher. Soph, you got to stay away, because by the time Lissa gets it, all right, she really has very limited options. The smaller little details here. So again, I think this ultimately just comes down maybe to a little bit of a lack of patience, but also here's where I think we can improve in trying to draw out that press, so that when we play through, it becomes more effective, and we have more space behind. So Addy, here, your decision to go back to Aris is fine. right? Because we're just moving the pinks around. But I would say maybe can you just draw this pink player into you just a little bit further, all right? If she steps all the way to you now, when you give the ball back to Aris, Aris has a little bit more time, and maybe now it becomes a little bit easier for her to maybe play kind of through the press. But by you playing back to Aris pretty early, it just allows this centre forward to adjust their run, and now Aris probably feels as though she's under a little bit more pressure. AK, you're doing a lot of running here to try and find it. Again, I think just by checking into that area right there, you've pulled a player across and we've possibly cut off a passing lane to Abby. So it's important for our number 6, whoever that central player is, to stay central and create a nice tight triangle, or even a diamond rather, to create that diamond with Aris and the 2 centre-backs. And then Aris, as it goes back to you, okay, you completely open up to the right. I think you've made your mind up early that you want to try and switch it. But once you open all the way up to the right, and this kind of goes for anybody in any position, you've taken away your option to go back to Addy. Okay, so if we pause it right now, probably the best option for you is to come back to Addy, and now Addy's got that space, right? Because we've drawn this forward out. Okay, so just a little bit more patience. But your first touch completely opens you up to the right, which means you can only play that way now. Okay, and as we look, there's pressure over there, and it's not a very safe ball for us to play. Final one from this game, and again, we just see a couple of little spacing errors, some angle errors. So this time we are able to get Addy stepping out, which is good. But again, Ava, you've checked all the way across into a position where, one, you probably don't want to receive it here anyway because you're under a lot of pressure, but we also don't have the option to switch out and go the other side. Okay, if Addy did want to go inside now, she would have to go back to Aris, which probably gives the opposition time to reset. Okay, Abby, you've also checked in, again, quite deep. I would give yourself a little bit more time. Generally, from a timing standpoint, you want to be checking in just as Addy needs you, right? And she's starting to just about need you now because the pressure's coming, but you're already in there, right? If you were 10 yards further back, then your check-in would, one, probably separate you from a defender a little bit more, but then as it got played to you, you could probably comfortably set the ball back to Liz. Again, it's just become a little bit compact in there now. And AK, you've kind of contributed to that getting a little bit too jammed up too. And then Soph, you're also pretty deep here as well. Okay, so even if the ball comes into you, we don't have a whole lot of space to work with. You can probably be pressed from behind. Now we actually get out of this one we get the ball into AK, good first touch. But again, because it's so compact, we've not really given ourselves any options ahead of the ball, and this means AK has to play in behind. Another similar example from our second game in Bethesda, and this is when Abby, you're playing as the 6, so I wanted to give you a little bit of a visual too. We've gone wide lens on this one, so again, I think our spacing is pretty good from the start, and you can see it's really opened up the white, and it's opened up a lot of space for us to play into. I'm happy with the patience. I'm happy with you deciding, Addy, that it's time to go back because there's nothing really on. Abby, the only thing I would say to you, again, just like I said to AK in the previous couple of clips, is if you can stay a little bit more central, okay? Now, maybe as Addy turns back, you can drop into maybe the top of the 18 and you can be the player who receives it, okay? Or if this white player stays with you, then a pass into Stephanie then maybe becomes more of an option. Okay, Addy's probably a little bit reluctant to play this ball to Stephanie now because this white player might be able to cut it off. Okay, so again, just a note for our 6s, Lucille, Caroline, Abby, AK, to try and stay central and create this diamond with our 2 centre backs and our goalkeeper, because we need you to be the player who can maybe receive on the half turn and switch us out to the other side. Clip from this past weekend. And again, it just kind of reiterates the importance of, because I think we actually start out relatively patient here, right? And the East team were pretty happy to press us. But in those moments, we need to have the composure to try and play through. And Abby, I think here's the importance now of keeping you in this space, because there's a relatively simple way out of this. As the ball travels to Gwen, Abby, if you can just free yourself a yard or two, we can play into you, and then you can probably play a first time pass out to Ainsley, and we've pretty much broke that press because they're a narrow. There's a narrow 2. They kind of have their right winger stepped high as well. So again, our free players in this situation are our fullbacks. And there was a good example of this. If you go and look at the video, I've highlighted one of the good examples of us playing around this earlier in this game. But Abby, you're just a little bit in, kind of, you're just not really involved in this play. Where again, I think if we use you now, we get you out. But obviously, we put Gwen under a little bit of pressure by not really giving her any support options. A good example of a build out, a relatively simple one. Whenever you're playing against a team that's going to press you pretty aggressively, obviously you want to try and play through that quickly. You don't want to continue to play short passes under high pressure. So a good decision here. Obviously, Gwen, you can't turn out and play. Maybe there would be an option in here. Like I said already, we want our 6 in this area. And then we would want a forward option, and then that player could maybe set the ball back to Ainsley if necessary, if you're marked tightly. But like I say, their pressure's pretty high and it's pretty flat. So in this situation, we do a good job of playing around it, and then we're out. Okay, and then our spacing ahead of the ball is good. AK, you get yourself on the opposite side of the defender, which is great. Stephanie, if we need to switch out, I think that's Stephanie. Maybe it's Soph. Sorry. But we have our other side of the second attacking midfielder in space on this side. So if we do need to come out through Abby, then we're good here. And we end up getting ourselves in a really good position now to play in behind. Abby, good example for you here. You've almost got it on this one. So Addy has it. This is a better view of where the 6 can position themselves. Now, you're not necessarily blocking a pass lane in here, but here's your space that we want to work you in. Okay, because again, it's going to be on the blind side of this attacking midfielder or striker for the opposition, and it's going to allow you to turn out and again, oftentimes give you a lot of space. Now, you do it, you give me a little step backwards. The only thing I would say now is just make sure you're checking those shoulders as you do it. All right, and you can probably drop a little bit more. Okay, and again, if Addy sees you here, and maybe if you make that move a little bit earlier or a little bit more obvious, then we get you on the half turn, you turn out, and now you've got tons and tons of room to work with. You can probably release Ainsley, you might be able to hit our right winger, but that is probably a little bit of a clearer example of the spaces we can try and get you in. Just wanted to finish with one more good example of just kind of, we've talked about just sometimes playing that extra pass, that extra 1 or 2 passes can be enough to just kind of give us the patience to play through an opposition. I think we do a good job of that here. So Abby, again, if I'm just being a little bit critical, I don't think you're an option. I think, again, if you drop 5 yards into this player's blind spot, maybe you're an option to switch out. And again, listen, if you want to be that was the position I played, and that was a position I used to try and find myself in a lot, was off the back of this player, where I could receive on the half turn and face forward. Okay, even if you stepped forward now, it's a little bit of a dangerous ball for you to receive because it's hard for you to open your body up. But if you drop 5 yards, then you can receive on the half turn, you can switch out. Okay, Lucille, we get a good little check into that little space. It allows you to set the ball to Ainsley. And now, typically, what we've done in this situation is we've tried to play forward straight on this first touch. And we saw that in one of the previous videos. But a little bit more patience here. Lucille, you do a good job of getting underneath the ball. It's just basically 2 extra passes to allow us to then bypass the press again. And then if you look ahead of the ball, our spacing continues to be really good. So as this ball goes into Jaden, you've got time, you can turn, that's great. We have Caroline, who's one of our attacking midfielders, making a run ahead of the ball. Ali, you're probably in a position to maybe start getting yourself in behind. And then Abby, if Jaden needed to, you'd probably be just wanting to step into this space so we could get a little setback from you or setback to you. And I think, to be fair, you're in that spot. So just, again, really good spacing. It keeps your options open. It keeps passing lanes open. And this ends up leading to almost a chance. But again, just the timing of the checks is good. The angles of our checks are good. We're patient on the ball. And again, more often than not, that's going to give you options to play forward and play through.